Welcome to Business on the Real with Eli Thompson, where we give small businesses a place to shine. Thompson, and today I thank you so much for tuning in. Throughout history, we have had sort of a taboo when we talk about mental health. It's been in the closet. A lot of people who had money were able to get assistance with mental health, and they were actually caused generationally. A lot of that was because they crossbred, they stayed in the same family. But still, mental health was not a discussion on the table because it was such a shame. It was such a taboo. And a lot of people who were suffering from depression or other kind of diseases that we call mental health diseases now didn't get the help that they necessarily needed because they didn't talk about it and they were afraid to talk about it. But lately, it's become a really big issue, especially because of the violent acts that are committed around the country. And it seems as if it is a reason, quote unquote, that is given a lot by the media for a shooting or a rampage, instead of it being more like a horrific act. And so mental health is always the excuse, and then there's a remedy after the fact. So today we have an extremely professional psychologist with us today. His name is Dr. Carlos Garcia of Tampa Counseling and Wellness, and we want to welcome him. So welcome, Dr. Garcia.
Eli, thank you so much for having me on the show. Really happy to come on here and talk a little bit today about mental health and ways to incorporate it, or sort of the way it impacts our society, and ways that we can utilize it to find some greater joy in our life.
Yes, sir. And I've noticed that since I've been here in Florida, a lot of people in Florida come from the north.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we have found here, especially working at the VA, when people come down from the north, they're escaping that winter, that cold winter weather. And I'm sure you've had a lot of clients who have experienced that as well. And so, if you will, tell us a little bit about what you're doing at the Counseling and Wellness Center and who your focus is on, if it's veterans, civilians, and how you're attracting clients. Is it word of mouth or whatever? But tell us a little bit about what you've been doing here in the Tampa Bay.
Sure. So I started my private practice about a year and a half ago, Tampa Counseling and Wellness, where I see clients, and it's a pretty wide range. But what I would say, if I was to narrow down more specifically the type of clients that I see, it's typically adult clients. I tend to stay away from working with kids. That can be a bit much. Um, and I do work with two different populations. I do work with the veteran population. One of the big reasons for that is I'm a veteran myself, and a lot of veterans, you have been talking about the stigma,
Mhm.
and a lot of veterans also carry this extra layer of stigma because of military culture, what they're taught in military culture, and just this idea of, I'm a hero, I'm supposed to keep it together, I am not allowed to sort of be weak, right? So
Mhm.
that's a sort of an extra layer that military and veteran folks sort of struggle with when it comes to mental health, but just the general population as well. And again, there's that stigma for them there as well, right? And this is has to do with our own culture and sort of how we treat and see mental health,
Mhm.
how it's been seen in the past, but also just each individual culture. I know a lot of Caribbean cultures, a lot of Hispanic cultures have this idea that mental health diseases just, they're not a thing, right? It's just sort of like, hey, suck it up, think more positively, it's all in your head, sort of a thing.
Mhm.
um, so I do work with veterans and first responders, but I also work with just the general population. And most of the clients that come and see me have some level of anxiety or depression, Eli. But when I say that, for the typical layperson, they'll think depression and think, oh, this is someone that, just sort of walks around all day feeling glum, sort of the rainy cloud over their head, can't get out of bed. Or when I say anxiety, they think of someone who's in a constant panic. And that's not the case. Depression can look something as simple as someone who gets out of bed every single day and is just feeling zero joy in their life.
Mhm.
They go to a job that they absolutely hate. They socially isolate themselves. Come home and sit and watch Netflix for the next 6 hours until it's just time to go to bed, drowning out whatever's going on inside. Right now, a lot of people might be like, "Well, wait a second, that sounds kind of familiar."
Yes.
Yeah, right. Or even with anxiety, it's just sort of this constant state of tension and worry, this constant stress about every single little thing in your life, a constant stress about feeling out of control. So, what I tell people is at some point in your life, you've probably experienced some level, at some degree of depression or anxiety. And so, seeing a counselor, going to therapy isn't just about alleviating these symptoms. For me, and the way I describe it to everyone I talk to and all of the clients I work with, therapy is about figuring out what are those challenges, what are those obstacles that are getting in the way of your life, that are getting in the way of finding your joy, that are getting in the way of having the fulfilling, loving relationships you want to have. Now, here's the thing, Eli, and you could probably agree with me on this. We don't know what we don't know,
Correct.
right? And
Yes.
so therapy is just about a process where you have this neutral outsider sort of helping you. We're kind of taking a look at your life and helping you sort of see some of the spots that you haven't been able to see before, right? And
Yes.
through that process, it's a process of growth, it's a process of development. And I've seen it time and again with my clients. They're just able to take their lives to the next level.
And that's one thing I really enjoy about talking with you. And I know you have a fabulous relationship with your client. I really do, because actually we met on one of the things that now is called a creator of mental health issues, social media. And your hashtag is life_doc. And I was like, oh my God. And you started following me. I'm like, who is Life Doc? So then when I found out that you were actually here in the Tampa Bay, I said, oh my gosh, I have to meet him just after reading so many of your posts, because your posts are so calming to the everyday mind, because you talk about things that are happening every day in our lives and how we can better approach those things. And so when we met, I was like, oh, I could talk to you forever. And it was great.
Likewise.
It's just like we clicked immediately. I know we both have a military background, but it was a lot of to how we have decided that we were going to live a better life.
Mhm.
And we were going to do whatever we could do in order to live that better life. And so I really appreciate you. I really do. That first meeting was amazing.
We had a great
So,
time.
but so, typically, like you said, most of those, especially in the military, or most of the people who are my age, like almost retirement age, we've gone through life so long, doing the same thing,
Mhm.
feeling the same way. And because that pattern is so difficult to break, and we put on this face, it's a
Right,
facade.
right.
We're afraid to take off the mask. We're afraid to ask for help. Do you find that that's one of those stumbling blocks that you have talked about?
Yes. Eli, I have found that that is the stumbling block.
Okay.
Okay. And I'll give you, I was actually thinking about this morning. Um, I had a dream last night. And in that dream, I was having an interaction with my father, and he's still around. Um, and in that interaction, he was sort of, we were building a cake, right? And he was correcting me in how to make the cake, right?
Okay.
And when I woke up, I was like, wow, that's interesting. When you hear the rest of the story, this is all going to make sense. You could probably analyze maybe why I was even having this dream. But I grew up in a household where, my dad was a military background, disciplinarian, and there was very little room for mistakes in my home,
Mhm.
right? And so anytime you spilled anything on the floor, or you know weren't weren't cleaning things the way that he wanted, there was sort of this stern reprimanding. As part of our culture
Yes.
too, the Hispanic culture of, sometimes there was some strong language as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, from the culture's perspective or from the parents' perspective, it's this idea of, well, we're just trying to guide the children to struggle the least in life and to understand and to learn,
Yes.
right? And we have this thing that somehow kids are going to learn through punishment. Okay?
Yes.
All the research in psychology is going to tell you otherwise, but that continues to be the belief. So let me tell you what evolves is that as a child, the message that I'm constantly hearing is that whatever output, whatever things I'm doing, whatever my behavior is not good enough,
Mm-hmm.
or it needs to be better,
Mm-hmm.
or it should be this way, meaning my way is not okay, my way doesn't work.
Yes.
Now, when a child hears that very sort of underlying message around who they are as children, what they start to believe is no longer my actions aren't okay and enough, I'm not okay and enough, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's not a surprise that when I become a teenager and into my early adulthood, I develop this strong perfectionism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything I need to do has to be perfect, or to some greater degree, the bar is
Yes.
constantly being raised higher and higher and higher. And I see you laughing because I
That's
feel like anytime I describe this, people are like, wait a second,
that's me.
I know what you're talking about, right? It's this constant theme of I'm not enough. There's more that I need to be doing. And there's sort of this two-pronged thing to it. One of them is that in a lot of ways it can drive our motivation and our wanting to have success. The problem, the second piece of it, and this is where the problem lies, is what happens when we don't reach that level, right?
Yes.
When we don't reach that level of success.
Yes.
It's what we do to ourselves internally. It's how we beat ourselves up. It's the things that we say to ourselves, right? And so, what I find with a lot of my clients is that they had some similar message in their upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, sort of the you brought home 5 A's and a B. What is this B about,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So that sort of focus, mind you, it's coming from very well, loving, well-intentioned parents, but unfortunately, the message becomes I'm not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And we sort of carry this with us into adulthood, not thinking to ever question it, because, like you said, it was just a part of how we
We
grew
are.
up.
Yes.
And I really do think, Eli, that is the reason why we see that we're living in this culture now of people just feeling, not happy with themselves, always looking for some better thing, more money, looking to be thinner, prettier, taller. I mean, it goes on and on and on. But what it is we're all trying to fill this gap, this hole that's been sitting within us for however long. And people might turn to a relationship to fill that gap. They might turn
Yes.
to drugs and alcohol. You know what? Some people might even turn to distracting themselves with work
Yes.
or exercise.
Yes.
Exercise is supposed to be a healthy thing, but I've seen some people that are like, yeah, I exercise 2 hours a day and I got to do it every day because if I don't do it,
Yes.
that doesn't sound like it's coming from a healthy place. The activity is healthy.
Yes.
So, I say all that to say that that's my typical client. They're coming in and feeling stuck and they're like, hey, why isn't, you know, here's my playbook, right? Here are the plays I know I'm supposed to run to be successful. Why are they not working?
Yes.
So my job is just to sit there with them and be like, let's look at these plays. Where did they come from? Who told you these plays were effective to
Mm-hmm.
begin with?
Mm-hmm.
And let's see if we can find some more creative, some ways that will really help you get to where you want to get without this feeling that you always have to be more.
Now, I like the way you said this playbook because immediately my mind went to the football field, right?
Right, right.
And if a runner is so focused on, I know we're supposed to focus on getting where we're going,
Hmm.
but if you're blindsided by somebody, you don't see them coming, you can get injured even more so than you would have been had you really been paying attention to your
Absolutely.
entire surroundings.
Absolutely.
And so, a lot of us have gone through that, as you said, especially, like I said, in my age group, because that's the way they were trained. That's
Yeah.
why our parents were trained. That's why our families were trained. And that was a survival mechanism.
Right. Right.
But now it's more about how can we thrive? instead of just survive.
Right.
So, as you said, in our cultures, and in the Latin culture, in the Black culture, we have a different perspective. So when I met you, I was like, oh, yes, this is amazing and awesome. First of all, because you're a male,
Mm.
because a lot of times there are women listening to other people's problems.
Sure.
And we as females, we don't know how to solve a lot of male problems. I'm just going to be honest. We don't.
Yeah.
It's a different
We're
perspective.
a different, we're a completely different species.
Yes, yes. And so then you're coming from the Latin culture. That's another reason that we clicked, because I could really understand and I could hear your voice. So, when people hear your voice, especially males hear your voice, don't you feel that they react a lot better and more comfortably because you're coming to them from those, especially from those two perspectives?
Yes, yes, Eli, I totally agree. I think, um, this toxic male sort of image, right? And again, I think you and I are talking about a cultural piece, but I mean, we can
Mhm.
see it in our own culture here in the US.
Yes.
And then we add this other layer of, again, men of color, Caribbean, Hispanic,
Mhm.
that's another layer, veterans, that's another layer, right? And it's this idea of weakness is not allowed.
Yes.
Speaking about your emotions is not allowed.
Mhm.
Suffering is not allowed, right? Sort
Mhm.
of just like kind of suck it up. And I know that in my household, what was taught and in my family was, you don't cry, we don't talk about emotions,
Mhm.
and just deal with
Yes.
it. I don't know that those are three good objectives for anyone in life, right?
Right.
And so when I see men that come to work with me, I already know that we're, before they even know it, that that's going to be part of our initial barrier, right? Is how can I place myself in a role for this man to feel um, that he is in a space where there is going to be zero judgment about expressing your feelings and
Mhm.
having your feelings,
Yes.
right? And making sure that when they get to that moment that they do, because I promise you in my office they will.
That's good.
Yeah, um, that they feel safe in having done so,
Mhm.
right? And you know I reflect on my own experience because my upbringing told me that I wasn't supposed to be in tune with my emotions. That was particularly difficult for me, someone who is highly sensitive.
Mhm.
And it took me a while to figure that out and be okay with that part of myself. What I mean by highly sensitive is when I'm mad, I get pretty angry. When
Mhm.
I'm sad, I really feel that sadness at a deep level. And when I'm happy, I mean, I'm exuberant,
Yes.
right? But I don't know if you're familiar, especially for folks down here in Florida, Public supermarkets has those Thanksgiving or Christmas commercials,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
they're absolute tear jerkers, right?
Yes.
Um, I begin to watch one of those and I'm already feeling sentimental, right? Now,
Wow.
mind you, now over time, having done my own work,
Mhm.
I'm very comfortable with expressing my emotions. I'm very comfortable sitting with other people in their emotions. And it was only through a process of understanding that I had spent a majority of my life becoming a Marine,
Mhm.
becoming a fireman after that,
Mhm.
right? I was literally sort of in a journey in the opposite direction of what I felt was most in line with who I am as a person, and that's emotions. But my culture told me that I needed to be tough. And I
Mhm.
said, okay, you want me to be tough? I'm going to be the biggest, toughest guy, most manly man you'll ever see,
Yes.
right? And I couldn't figure out, Eli, why at almost 30 something, I I felt like there was this huge thing missing in my life,
Yes.
and that's because I was living a life. I was living a life that wasn't mine. I wasn't that person, and it wasn't until I started to get in touch with and be okay with my own feelings, be okay with crying when I was struggling, be okay with just throwing up my hands sometimes and saying I don't have control of this. I really don't know what to do, and I need to turn to someone else. And yes, I feel weak right now, and it's okay for me to feel like I'm weak right now,
Yes.
right? And
Mhm.
that was the biggest shift for me. And also one of the reasons that I am so passionate about doing this, because there's not a lot of, psychologists who are males in the field.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I feel like I really put myself in a place where I can be there for other men to help them sort of understand their emotions, and to be like, hey, men, you know what? It's okay to not always be okay. And I
And
think really that's the core message that needs to be put out
yes. And even in my case, for instance, I'm a very emotional person myself. Like you said, when I get angry, and I vent, I want to vocalize that.
there. Yeah.
So, but people, and I'm like this with other people, when you get to that point, get it out
Yeah.
so that we can get on with what needs to be done.
Right.
So I allow people to vent. And I had, when I was younger, I had a cousin. She was just screaming. She was up in my face. And she was shorter than me. I was sitting down and she was tearing me apart. And when she finished, she looked at me because I was just like, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And so when she finished, I said, have you finished? She said, yeah. She was so perplexed. She said, yes. I said, okay, so what are we going to do tonight? Where are we going? Because I knew, when you don't allow yourself to express what's inside, you suppress it,
Yes.
and other issues ensue. I don't want to be the reason for that in people's lives. So, even with my grandsugars, I have one who is he's special needs kind of, but he was like, go off. He says, oh, he's throwing a tantrum. Like,
Yeah.
okay, so is that all right? How do you feel? Well, I'm okay now. Okay, so what do you want for dinner?
Yeah.
And why did you feel that way?
Mm-hmm.
What happened to cause you to go to that level? Well, I don't know. Yes, you do. Because everybody knows,
Mm-hmm.
but not everybody wants to admit it.
Right.
But in your practice, you give people that space to
Absolutely.
do that.
Absolutely. And I think, you bring up a great point. That's the image I sort of want people to keep in their head, is that
Mhm.
every time you repress an emotion or a need, right, or some angry feeling or sadness, all of that is not going anywhere. It doesn't stay there in that moment. No,
Mhm.
it's staying inside of you. It's kept, we talk about keeping it bottled up. That's a thing,
Yes.
right? And every time we don't express something that we're feeling, it just sort of stays in there, sort of like a thorn in our side. And so a lot of the people that I work with, really what's going on with them is that they're coming in with this bottle of just stuff
Mm-hmm.
that they've never had the opportunity to talk about, express. And, I want my office to be the place where they can come and just dump all that stuff,
Yes.
right? Just that in and of itself, it's like this, sometimes at the end of a session, when we're doing this process and there's a lot of emotions and things that we're talking about, at the end of a session, a client will just sort of stop and be like, and I'm like, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it feels like. And I know that it's been a good session. But the other part to that is, and I help my clients understand this, is it's impossible to repress sadness, anger, and negative emotions without also at the same time repressing connection, love, happiness. We can't decide, we can't pick and choose which ones we want. So it was only after I started allowing myself to really, and it takes some vulnerability, right? It takes some vulnerability to admit to others that you're not doing well, or that you don't know, or that you're struggling. But it was only after doing that that I felt also okay sharing, my positivity with others. And
Mm-hmm.
just, the relationships in my life just went to a next level in terms of connection. I mean, it was a beautiful thing to see. So if we can get through that first hard part, and I know that it's hard because it takes a lot of vulnerability,
Yes.
especially for men,
Yes.
If we can get through that first hard
Thank
part,
you for tuning in to
I mean,
today's
it just
episode of
changes
Business on the
everything,
Real. We
everything,
invite you to the
in our
second
life
half of our
from
in-depth
there on out.
conversation with
It
Dr.
does. It
Carlos
does. And
Garcia.
it helps us to
Now, if
remember
you or
that we're all
someone you
human
know is a
beings.
woman struggling with a
Well,
toxic
in
relationship, past or
2018, I
present,
found out
please
that
join
according
Women
to
Becoming Whole from Toxic
it's called the
Relationships
Substance Abuse and
each
Mental Health
third Thursday
Association.
in a private
They said
online
that there were
setting. For more information, please contact
11,682
me at
mental health facilities in the United States, and that was in 2018.
womenbecomingwhole.again.
I'm sure that
That's
number has grown.
womenbecomingwhole again at
And as I said, now
gmail.com.
that we're
I look
beginning
forward to
to
seeing you there.
recognize or
Now,
admit
let's
that
get back to
certain
our show.
things that go on in our lives, it's not necessarily like we're psychotic or suffering from schizophrenia so much, but depression has become a really big issue in the headlines, in families, because people are starting to talk about it now. Whereas a long time ago, depression was basically you keeping your mouth shut until you were spoken to.
Right.
And so there was no differentiation there. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about was why you think there's so many more mental health facilities that are popping up now.
Yeah. Well, I was just speaking with someone the other day in terms of how far we've come in terms of helping to sort of alleviate the stigma around mental health. There was just last year during the NBA season, I saw that there was a commercial that they played where two NBA players sort of spoke a little bit about their struggles, right? And it's sort of this campaign, towards mental health. And we're also starting to see that in a lot of ways, culture, at least for millennials, and I
Mhm.
know that that's a term, people sort of have different ideas around, but our younger culture is sort of embracing the idea of therapy. You'll see it come off a lot of ways in almost a comical way, like,
Mhm.
hey, look what my anxiety does to me, right? When it comes to like memes and stuff,
Oh, okay.
like, here's me struggling with my depression. And I know that in some ways that can feel joking for someone who's struggling, with severe depression. But I also think, and what I've been noticing, is that it's bringing a lot of people who typically wouldn't say something about their anxiety or depression or sort of keep it hidden to
Mhm.
say, oh my God, there's thousands and thousands of people out there whose anxiety does the same thing mine does. And I can connect with that.
Yes.
Right. And not that we're making a joking matter about it, but I
Mhm.
think it's helping people see I'm not alone. I'm not
Yes.
the only one who struggles with this. I'm not the only one that thinks this way. I'm not the only one. So I think that piece is very helpful. Again, I think these younger generations are sort of saying, hey, um, this idea of like it's okay to struggle and it's okay to get help for that, for whatever it is that I'm struggling. We're starting to shift more and more away. Also, when we talk about sort of depression, when we're talking about suicide, when we're
Mhm.
talking about, and we're so bombarded by it on social media and access to, Robin Williams, Kate Spade,
Mhm.
Anthony Bourdain, just in the last few years. People take interest in those sort of stories because, these are people that we sort of only see, the beauty in their lives. And, now we're investigating and saying, wow, that someone could on the outside seem like they have it all together,
Yeah.
and on the inside be struggling so much. So I think a big portion of, to come back to your question, I think a big portion of it is that there's sort of this normalizing of what it means to be struggling with anxiety and depression, right? Um, I think we're also just getting tired of losing people to suicide.
Mhm.
I think, that's such a huge, huge conversation topic when it comes to veterans now, where we're losing 22 veterans a day to suicide,
Yes.
right? And when you compare the numbers of, soldiers and military personnel that we've lost in, during war
Mhm.
and the amount we're losing once they get back home, it's
Yes.
just inconceivable, right? So that's out in the public as well. And so I think it's just the information is finally getting out there.
Mhm.
This thing that we're doing, right? This conversation that we're having will be heard. and it will maybe just get one other person to have a question about, like, hey, let me dig into this information a little bit more. Let me reach out to that person a little bit more. So I
Yes.
think we're doing so much more, which I really, again, I appreciate you having me on here and talking about this really important topic. But we're doing more and more to sort of paint a face, or to add a face to what mental health is and what it isn't. Because I think up until recently, it's all been misconceptions and myths. And now what we're starting to see it more clearly, it's starting to make sense for us. And when we can make sense of things, we can relate to it so much better.
Yes, indeed. Because a lot of people, especially in the larger cities, nowadays it seems as if you are quote unquote alone. Everybody's busy working. Everybody's, if you get to go to church or desire to go to church, you go there, you come home, you're so tired, and then you're working with your children. You don't have much time to really stop and think about how you're feeling.
Right.
Because we're almost like robots.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you said, social media, in a way, has helped us to recognize that there are other people like us, because we typically don't get to go outside of our own walls to see anyone else other than that. And a lot of people, as you say, the media has allowed us to see into the lives of prominent people, so that we can recognize, like, oh my gosh, if that was them, what about me? And what could someone that I'm associated with be going through at this moment? Because that's one of the things I really try to think about, because I've, have been diagnosed with depression. And I realize a lot of times that I'm not acting a certain way that I feel comfortable, and nobody notices.
Right.
And it's hurtful. It's really hurtful. So I try to look not at a person from the outside, but into a person.
Yes.
And because I want to affect positively upon their lives.
Right.
And so I really thank you for what you're doing. And especially in this area, being in the quote unquote sunshine state, everybody's supposed to be happy. We have beaches. Whoa, woo. We get out here and we do this thing every day, almost like California, getting on the boogie boards and out. But life is real. I was looking at another statistic that's by the Florida Behavioral Health Association. And they say that Florida ranks 44th in access to mental health services, which is kind of sad, because we do have a lot of people who are even homeless. Yes. We don't know what's going on. We don't know why they become that way. But one of the reasons I thought about was because this is a retirement state, typically, that when people come here, they don't know people. And another reason I wanted to have you on the show is because they need to have someone in the community that they can connect with. They need to see a face. And you're being a male. We have so many male retirees coming into this area, flocking in as snowbirds. Who are they going to talk to? What could be the gloomiest time of their lives?
Yeah.
We have people coming into the VA all the time, don't know what's going on. So what are your thoughts about how we can better communicate in our communities when we know that someone needs help, and reach out to a professional such as yourself?
Sure. So, I think in sort of combating stigma, you need to be both creative and strategic.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, I can go out there and do talks on depression and anxiety and the symptoms and what that means. But my focus is always something different. My focus is always to talk about and to people who, sort of your everyday people, right? And that's sort of why I use this, these little, these stories for people to say, hey, wait a second, I can relate to that.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that opens up the dialogue, but it also helps to give it a face, right? Like, I have struggled with depression and anxiety in my past. And still sometimes when life gets pretty overwhelming or stressful, I can start to feel some of those emotions coming up in the same way. Yes. Right? Because stress is a big sort of indicator for people of when those emotions start to come up. But I also can sit here and laugh and have a good time because it's part of being a human, right?
Mhm.
Like you said earlier, Eli. So, for instance, here in the community of Tampa, I will give a presentation on the psychology behind being an entrepreneur, right? So I work with some business owners and entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
And the core message is there is, one of the terms I use is your self-worth has nothing to do with your net worth,
Ooh, that's
right?
good.
And so again, that idea of being enough, I talk
Mhm.
about perfectionism. The next week, I might be doing a talk on personal branding for people who are trying to grow their business or work within an organization. And personal branding is more about knowing yourself,
Mhm.
knowing what you stand for, what are those values, boundaries that you will set around those values, and how do you feel about the person you are. All these things are things that I work with in session with my clients. The
Mhm.
week after that, I might be giving a talk on relationships, right?
Mhm.
How to have healthier relationships. And a big portion of that comes to, who are you? What's your identity? How do you value yourself? Are you trying to be in a relationship again to fill some part of you that feels like it's not enough? So, regardless of where I go, regardless of who the client or patient is, the message is for everyone. And the
Yeah.
message always comes down to, again, that thing we said earlier about what we're feeling about ourselves on the inside. Oftentimes, the playbook is wrong. Oftentimes, the way we feel, about ourselves or think about ourselves is coming from a place that, um, it's. If I could give you a brief sort of scenario,
Okay.
right? This
Mhm.
helps everyone relate. Let's say you have a little girl who's 7 years old and she's going out to eat with her parents. And her parents, in hopes of getting her to start to feel more like an adult and more autonomous, they say, hey, today you can pick out whatever you want to eat from the menu, right? So she gets super excited, goes in there, looks at the menu, and sees this beautiful cheesy pizza. Mom, I want the pizza. And mom says, why don't you just get the burger? It's what you normally get, right? She's, no, 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 the pizza. But, what if you don't like it? Why don't you just go with the safe thing? No, 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 please, the pizza. And then dad will chime in, pizza's too big. We're not, you're not going to eat it all. We're not going to spend the money on it. And the girl, feeling defeated, says, fine, I'll have the burger. So my question to people is, in that moment, what do you think that little girl believes about her ability to make decisions?
She can't. They're not worthy.
My decisions are no good. I can't make decisions. I need to
Mhm.
check with others first,
Yes.
right? Now,
Yes.
what we know is that probably wasn't an isolated incident, right? That probably has happened in different ways around her academics, her ballet, food, the way she dresses over the course of her childhood.
Yes.
Do you think that this is a girl that when she grows up will have some challenges making decisions?
Yes. She will have a lot of problems.
The bigger the decisions, the more anxiety, the more stress.
Yes.
Do you think this is a girl that's going to have some issues with self-esteem or self-doubt?
Definitely.
Absolutely. Right. So this is how I put it for people. It's not that you had some traumatic childhood. Again, it's that the messages that were almost unconsciously and covertly given to you, because a child thinks differently, they internalize and personalize everything.
Mhm.
They take a different message away.
Yes.
Right. And
Yes.
if we've never thought to check that message to see that it's even there, we
Mhm.
walk around feeling like I'm not enough because of something, again, some message that was given to me so long ago that I'm still carrying around and it's making me struggle.
Yes.
Now, that story that I'm relating to you, I tell to everyone. And 99% of the times I get this, as I'm telling the story, I'm like, yeah, they're catching it because some piece of that story is resonating with them.
Yes.
Right. And now this is every single person that I see in my practice. They're
Mm.
dealing with some version of this.
Mhm.
And it's all stuff that's in here.
Yes.
Stuff that we've been told, a narrative that we've been carrying around that is serving us no purpose at this point in our lives.
Yes.
Right. So coming back to the thing of stigma, by having this conversation, by telling these stories, I get people to say, oh, wait a second, I've sort of have felt this way at some times, or I've sort of struggled with this at some times. And I'm like, yeah, that's called anxiety or depression, right? Like, that's this scary monster thing you've been talking about. It's been a part of you at some time.
Wow.
And I think that's brilliant. I think that's a brilliant way to get people to sort of understand, what other people are going through with, when they're having anxiety or depression, but also to sort of help them understand themselves. Right. And I think when we just make it more global, when we make that message more global, when we make it more relatable for people, when we make it sort of resonate with them,
yes,
I think that's when we're doing a hell of a job in this awareness of mental health and what it looks like.
yes, instead of pointing the finger,
Right.
Well, Dr. Garcia, I really enjoyed just talking to you. And one thing that I was thinking about just when you were telling that story is that back to the Bible, when Jesus used parables to explain things.
Right.
And the way you were explaining it, it was like you make the parables more palatable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easier for someone to ease themselves into that seat and say, it's okay for me to talk about this.
Very well said.
That I really like that story. And yes, of course, it did resonate with me quite a bit.
That's why I keep telling it over and over, because as long as people keep resonating with it, I'm going to keep doing it.
Yes. Well, Dr. Garcia, you're also going to take part as a presenter at the event that I'm conducting in January, and you'll be there January 18th at 12 Rounds of Health, Fight for Your Life. So can you tell me just a little bit, about what your particular talk will be about?
Yes. Yeah. So first, thanks for the invite into this event. It seems so exciting, and I know people are really excited about it. Eli, sort of what I was talking about earlier, how I infuse this one little message around sort of any topic that I'm discussing. And I think our biggest roadblocks for anything in life, whether it's success or relationships, work, being a parent, is all up here.
Mm-hmm.
And so really what I want to share with people is, one, to get them in a place where they're open to exploring what might be getting in their way.
Yes.
Because that needs to be there first, right? If you're coming in with sort of a closed mind, you're not going to want to explore that. So being open to exploring, what's been getting in my way, which, probably is you for the most part.
Yes.
But let's help you see how you've been getting in your way and why.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because once we identify what the problem is per se, then we can sort of face it head on. So if the thing that's kept me from getting healthy, from starting to eat better,
mm-hmm.
from going to the gym, is some belief that I won't be able to do it, I won't be able to lose the weight that I want to lose, or maybe I won't be able to eat the right foods for the amount of time, I will explore with somebody, where is this belief that you're going to fail? And it sounds like maybe there's some fear of failure. Let's talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe there's a fear of success. And people always give me the weird sort of eyes, fear of success. Why the heck would I be fearing success? Well, success means that you have to change who you are. Success means you have to let go of the excuses.
Mm-hmm.
Success means now you are responsible to this image or this thing you've put out there.
Yes.
And sometimes it's easier to just sit back and be like, hey, I can just keep making excuses and saying work's getting in the way and all that stuff. That's easy, right?
Yes.
So again, just sort of helping people get into their heads about what particularly for them are the things that have been obstacles, help them explore it. Once they can sort of identify what that is, then getting around that obstacle becomes 1,000 times easier.
And the reason that I wanted you to come and speak as a psychologist is because everything starts with a thought, and that thought determines what your belief system is. Right. And controls your mind. So that's where everything starts. And I wanted to make that one of the first presentations so that people can come in and grasp more of the physical needs, the nutritional needs, even if it's meditation, so on and so forth, to help them ease their way back into a healthier being.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
I like what you said there, because actually, if you sort of take a look at the work that I do, it
mhm,
is all around sort of core beliefs about ourselves.
mhm,
And someone will come in, having issues with, let's say, their personal relationships. Someone else will come in because they can't get in shape the way that they want to. Someone else will come in because they're having problems at work. Someone else, they're just not feeling well. The symptom is always different,
mhm,
but the problem is always the same.
mm,
The problem is always what we're thinking about ourselves. And so it's interesting. I might have someone come in who's maybe drinking a bit much or
yes.
more than they should,
Mhm,
and we never even touch the topic. We talk about how they feel about themselves, we talk about a little bit about their relationships, but once we get them to identify their own limiting beliefs,
yes.
everything else in their life falls into place. The drinking goes away, the relationships tend to improve. Why? Because now they're feeling more confident. It's like everything comes together once we get to that little seed of the doubt, the self-confidence, that piece.
Yes.
It's brilliant. I love it. I could talk about this stuff all
Yes.
day.
Amazing. It's amazing. And I feel like you're the perfect person for so many people to come and see,
Thank you.
the perfect person for everybody to come and listen to at this presentation. So I invite people to come out to 12 Rounds of Health, Fight for Your Life, January 11th, 2020 to February 15th, 2020. And Dr. Garcia is going to be our presenter for January the 18th. And I really look forward to that. I truly do. So, Dr. Garcia, could you tell people how to get in touch with you?
Sure. So they can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is at life_doc. People are like, where did that name come from? I'm like, I'm the life doc. I'm the doctor for whatever you need. I'm the help desk for your life,
Yes.
right? So they can follow me on Instagram at life_doc. They can always reach out to me at Carlos at tampacw.com. Drop me an email. They could also reach me by phone, 813-644-1791. If you just, want to chat, have a question about something. Um, you know, I always encourage people to reach out, even if they just want to say hello and have a couple questions. I'm glad to sit down with people all the time who are just wanting to sort of explore, the beginnings of what might be getting in their way. Doesn't mean they have to come and, sit for therapy or that they're getting my services. I'm happy to talk with someone just for, 10, 15, 20 minutes and do what a psychologist does. And that'll sort of look like, I heard you say X, Y, and Z. I wonder if you've thought about, and that usually means, hey, here's what I see.
Mhm.
Here's where some stuff might be that you should go and look at. But yeah, I always encourage people to feel free to, reach out to me whenever they can.
That's wonderful. Now, you're in two locations, correct?
Correct. I have an office in the Land O'Lakes area, right off of 54 and 41.
Mhm.
I also have an office now in Tampa, right near International Plaza and Raymond James Stadium, and coming soon to the Brandon area.
That's
Yeah. Yeah.
outstanding. Oh, congratulations on your expansion.
Thank you.
That's really wonderful. So I thank you so much for being with us today, sharing your thoughts, sharing your knowledge, and just sharing your total personality
Thank you,
and
Don.
bringing so much to the table that people will really want to eat from that table.
Thank you, Eli. Thank you so much for having me. It's always such a pleasure. I mean, your spirit is every time, even when we're messaging, I can be sort of in a zoned out, sort of gloomy day, and I get a message from you. I'm like, oh, it's Eli, right? Just bringing
So
rays of sunshine into my life. So
thank you
thank you
so
for having me, Eli. And I love talking with you.
well, thank you so much, sir. And you have a great evening,
Thank
and
you.
we'll see you the next time on
Thank you again for tuning in to Business on the Real with Eli Thompson. If you want to give us a call, you can reach us at 844-509-5565 or email us at admin@elithompson.world. Until the next time, may God bless.